If there's one thing that pretty much every writer can agree on, it's that we almost always hate our older writing. Even sometimes with stuff that's fairly recent, we develop some sort of dislike for it and wish we could just revise it. And especially when you go really, really far back, it's gonna get a little bit difficult and it might get a little bit cringy. Once in a while though, I like to just kind of think back to where I started and the first things that I wrote, the first stories, the first novels that I wrote. I'm writing my third novel. I've talked about this a little bit, but I did write 2 novels before that were not great, especially the first one was really bad, and I actually haven't gone back and read it for a very long time, but I remember things very distinctly about it, and I still do have it logged away in a little corner of my computer where I've hidden it so that nobody could find it. But it's good. I mean, it's mine. I worked really hard on it, and I wouldn't be where I am now if I hadn't sludged my way through that original novel and learned so much. So I was thinking about this the other day, and without actually having to get that novel out and consult it and reread it, I just started thinking of all the things that I have improved and all the ways that my writing, my approach to writing, everything has just gotten so much better. And I thought this was actually a really fun video idea. I thought maybe you guys would like to hear some of the ways that my writing has changed and has progressed and the things that I've learned. And if you are also a writer or an artist, I would love if you would leave your own in the comments, because this is something that I think we all share, but we probably have learned different things and changed in different ways. So I would love to hear some of the ways that your writing or your craft has changed over time as well. But without further ado, let's get into all of the ways that my writing has changed and mostly gotten better since that very first novel. Firstly, I have now definitely found my side in the whole plotting versus pantsing debate. I am a hardcore plotter. My very first novel, I did pants. I was 13 when I started it, so I think that's fairly natural. You're young, you're creative, you have this idea. You don't necessarily think about the art of outlining. And some people, as they continue to write, that continues to be the best way for them to write. And other people are kind of like me, and you discover the magic of the outline. I'm sorry if you're a pantser and you're cringing right now, but I personally love outlines. Cannot get enough of them. Want to marry them. As a writer, I think an outline for me, a lot of pantsers say it takes the fun out of it or it kind of stifles their creativity, but for me, it actually allows my creativity to flourish. I think just planning stuff out, and I sort of have that euphoria of developing the plot as I'm developing the outline. I still have all the same fun, I just do it in this condensed form before I write the whole thing. And I think for me that just works so much better. I feel like it brings out my creativity. It allows me to see where I need to fix the outline, and I'm totally fine with making edits and making changes and stuff, but it just keeps it, I think, in a line and sort of a progression that I need in order to stay on track. The second way my writing has changed is that the plot and the story has gotten a lot more complex. In my first novel, I had decent characters, I had a plot, something that was gonna happen, and I sort of knew the idea of where I wanted it to go, but it was kind of one story and sort of one thread carrying the novel. And in a lot of novels, there is one main thread. In fact, probably in most novels, there's that main story that sort of carries you on to the end of the book, and that's the one you're most invested in. But there's also other things going on, and there are also complexities, and there are also things sort of overlapping. This is something that in my original writings, I didn't really have naturally. I had this creative idea, I developed it, but it was one idea. And I mean, I'll admit this is something I'm still working on, because I think it's something that over time you just get better and better at. But the novel that I'm working on right now has so much more complexity in the plot than my first novel, and definitely even than my second novel. There's a lot more going on, there's a lot more details, and actually probably a lot of this I owe to the fact that I outlined and the fact that I really delved into this world and into my characters and into the story before I actually started drafting and before I let myself get carried away with that main theme of the plot. The third way that my writing has developed over time is that my characters now have a lot more internal struggles, and they're a lot deeper, I think, than my original characters. Part of this comes with age, I know, because that first novel I wrote from the age of about 13 to 17, and then my second novel I wrote when I was in university, and now of course I'm an adult, much more mature, so part of that I'm sure has to do with that. But at the same time, I think it's something that you develop over time, because when you first write a novel, and if it's like my novel, which was very plot focused, it can be very easy to forget about those internal struggles or to have just very shallow internal struggles. My first novel was very much point to point. The plot was just happening to my character. My novel right now is kind of a mix of character driven and plot driven, but in a lot of ways it is plot driven. But I've also managed to capture that balance, I think, I hope. I'm working on it. But I've gotten much better at capturing that balance between the internal struggles that are still going on, as well as, of course, the external struggles which are propelling the novel forward. Another way that my writing has changed is in the genre that I like to write, actually. My first novel was high fantasy, and ever since I was a kid, that was sort of where my mind went. I take that back, actually. My very first short stories were mystery, but my first novel was a high fantasy, and that was kind of just what I dreamed of. But I've sort of segued into low fantasy, and that's where I feel really comfortable right now. I can't really say that it's because I like low fantasy better, because I don't think I have a preference. I really enjoy reading and watching both, and I think if and when I do write a high fantasy, I think I'll really love it and I think I'll really enjoy it. But recently I've just really enjoyed writing urban fantasy, so that's where I'm gonna stay for the moment. As I've continued to write, I have also become kind of an obsessive note taker. So for this novel, I have so many more backstory notes than I've ever had for any of my novels or stories before. When I was writing my first novel and a lot of my earlier projects, I sort of had this weird feeling. It wasn't actually a mentality because I didn't make up my mind that this was gonna be my opinion, but I had this feeling every time I would try to brainstorm or sort of explore the outskirts of my novel. It felt like I was somehow wasting time, like planning stuff that wasn't actually going to go into the novel, or thinking about things or expanding things that were most likely not going to be used in the novel at all, was somehow wasting my time and somehow wasn't applying myself to the actual project, which now just completely blows my mind. I have no idea how I thought that and felt that way, because I've learned from firsthand experience that that's just not the case. Obviously, there are ways, granted, to waste time and to sort of procrastinate working on something that actually helps, and not all brainstorms, not all exercises that you might try are gonna be that useful. That's just an unfortunate fact, but it's so worth trying them. As I got older, I kept reading these articles and these books, and everyone was always telling you to brainstorm and to expand your characters and expand your plot details and your world building outside of the plot. And every time I'd read that, I'd just think, no, that's a waste of time. I mean, if it's not gonna be in the novel, if it's not actually gonna contribute to the story itself, what's the point? It wasn't until I actually did this for myself. This was definitely something that I had to experience, and I had to have that realization firsthand. But when I actually tried this, and when I actually sat there and just spent an hour or two of my writing session brainstorming something that I was not convinced I was gonna use, was not convinced it was gonna be that helpful, and I just tried it. And I realized that even if maybe it didn't directly affect my story, it definitely affected me and my approach to my plot and to my characters and to my story, and that can have such a huge impact. The sixth way that my writing has changed is that I kind of have a prose style, baby's first prose style. When I was writing my first novel, I was definitely aware of the prose and aware of the style of writing, but I think I just sort of went with what was natural. And I didn't really think that hard about repetition and sentence flow and, you know, short sentences and long sentences and how I was starting and ending sentences and just sort of the patterns and the flow, the rhythm really of what I was writing. And it was sort of in the back of my head, but it was never something I was thinking consciously about. There always is an element of naturalness, that's not a word, but there always is an element of this natural feel, and you do have to sort of go with your gut. At the same time though, there is something to be said about being aware of your prose style and being aware of what makes good prose. And sometimes, especially now that I'm doing revisions, you actually do have to pay attention and just stop and read a paragraph or two paragraphs or a chapter and focus solely on prose. Don't focus on your character building, don't focus on your plot, don't focus on the details, just focus on how you've written it and what it sounds like. The seventh way, it's very difficult with my T here, but the seventh way that my writing has gotten better, I guess I can say in this case definitely, is that I track my progress. With that first novel, I just plowed ahead and I didn't care how many words I was writing in a session. I didn't care how many words the novel ended up. I just didn't care. Now though, I actually keep a log. I've talked about this. I'll show you my notebook again because I love this notebook. One of my best friends got it for me, but I log all of my writing sessions in here. I put down the date, I put down the word count of what I wrote. I just track this a lot more. I pay attention to how many sessions I've gotten in the week, in the month, in the year. This isn't necessarily because I want to set myself strict deadlines. I've talked about this as well. I don't do this for a living. I have a full-time job. I have other things. I have YouTube that I do. So it's not because I want to enforce some sort of strict schedule, but it is really helpful for enforcing a loose schedule as well as just seeing what's happening and seeing how many times do I really write in a month? How many words do I really accomplish in an average session? And I just think knowing more about this is just helping me understand my writing and my approach to writing. The 8th way that my writing has changed is that I'm a lot more realistic now about my goals and my dreams. When I was writing that first novel, I sort of had this idea in my head that I was gonna be one of those teen authors and I was gonna get published, and I never thought it would be easy. I knew it would be difficult, but I just don't think I had the full realization of why it would be difficult. I had no idea, really. Now, I've not only gotten older, of course, but I've also learned so much about writing, about the writing industry, about publishing, both traditional and self-publishing. I've just read a lot more, I've learned a lot more, and I think I've just gotten much more realistic with my dreams. I still have big dreams. I still want to get traditionally published. I still want to make writing as big of a part in my life as I can possibly make it. But I just think I've sort of taken those dreams, kept them just as wonderful and lovely as always, but put them in this sort of boundaries of logic and realism. I know, super fun things. Maybe that sounds a little bit sad, but I don't feel like it is. I actually feel liberated by this fact because I'm actually able to support those dreams and those ambitions with a bit of realism as well. So I feel like it's just encouraged me even more to have those dreams and to just be a little bit more thoughtful about them. Number 9 is revisions. That's it, just revisions. Of course, I have revised before. I have revised many times, but when it comes to my novels, my first novel, I didn't revise. Part of this was because I was already sort of working on my second novel in my head and in my notes, so I was just ready to go, and I knew that my first novel was not publishable. So that was probably a little bit of it, but I think a lot of it too was I had that sort of new writer tendency to get excited about the next project and just boom, on to the next project. And when that first draft is done, you feel like it's done, the project's done, the novel's done, it's written. But obviously, you know, if you're a writer yourself, that revisions are just really important. I'll admit, I am one of those writers that gets attached to what I write. And I mean, I know this is natural for everybody to some extent, but some of us struggle with it a little bit more than others. And I don't like deleting things. I don't like taking things out. Over time though, and with multiple different writing projects, I have just learned and seen for myself how much of a difference this can make. If you can just detach yourself long enough to improve your story, and if it's for the better of the story, it's definitely worth it. Lastly, number 10, the 10th way that my writing has changed over time is that I have just gotten a lot more patient. It's a little bit tough to say that out loud because I am so excited about the novel that I'm working on and I really want to share it. I really want it to be done, not because I'm not enjoying it as much as I just want it to be finished and ready to move on to the next stage. It's actually a bit weird because I am a bit of an impatient person in a lot of different aspects of my life. So it's weird that I would like to write novels. The longest type of project I could have possibly chosen. Of course I chose it. For some reason though, I am just drawn to it and it's my favorite type of thing to create. So it's something that I've had to work on and I've just had to develop that skill. Maybe a collection of the things I've talked about in this video have contributed to the fact that I am more patient about it though, like tracking my progress, outlining so that I really can see how much I've done, how much I have in front of me, paying more attention to details, valuing, revising, all of these things that I've developed I think are side effects and help in developing my patience. So those are 10 ways that my writing has changed and has developed since I wrote that first novel, which once again, we're gonna keep in the vault. We're not gonna show that to anybody ever. That being said, the novel that I'm working on now, I obviously have shared a lot more about. I have tons of videos. I actually will link you to the playlist of all of my writing videos if you wanna check out more. This month, I am also going to start sharing some sneak peek type of content about the novel that I'm working on my Patreon. If you're not already a patron, if you haven't already checked that out, we have a little club called The Fellowship because I love Lord of the Rings, if you didn't know that already. But I'm going to start sharing some little things about my novel. I did recently do a poll about what sort of stuff you want to see. So if you want to join Patreon, if that's something that you're interested in, please do check it out. It's in the link below. Like I mentioned earlier, if you are also a writer or an artist of any sort, I would love to hear how your writing or how your craft has changed over time. So please do leave anything in the comments below if you want to leave 1 or 2, if you want to leave 10. I'm just really interested to hear how your craft has developed as well. Shoot, we made it so many videos without spilling anything, and I'm now spilling tea. Not the kind that gets you YouTube views, just the messy kind. All right, I think this video has run its course. I'm gonna put my tea down. So I'm just going to wrap up this video as we are. Thank you guys for watching as always, and I will see you soon in another video.